Okay, so I think we're good to go now and start the session. So good morning and welcome to today's session, exploring career readiness and career self-management for young people. I'm Dr. Emma Parry, and I'm one of the careers consultants at the Sheffield University Management School, and I'm really pleased to be sharing today's session space with Emily Tanner, who's Head of Research at the Careers and Enterprise Company in the UK, who's going to talk us through a tool to measure career readiness in 11 to 18-year-olds for the first part of the session. And then we'll move into a workshop format at 11 o'clock with myself and my colleague, Dr. Sarah Brooks, who's a lecturer in organisational behaviour at the university, to discuss and exchange ideas around developing career self-management in students during and beyond university time. So we all really share the kind of values of having a discursive and safe space for conversation today. And so we do want people to share their questions and comments as much as possible for it to be interactive. So please feel free to add comments, questions, thoughts to the chat box, and we'll try and pick those up as we go throughout the session. So please do connect with all of the speakers today and with each other through the conference app. If you're interested in adding yourself to our networks and to sort of starting to work together in the future on any of our shared interests, really. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Emily to start off the session. Thanks, Emily.
Great, thanks very much, Emma, and good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to present some work to you and to hear your views. So I'm just going to do the screen share and get that set up. So hopefully you can see full screen. Emma, would you mind just giving me a thumbs up and letting me know all looks okay? Super, thanks very much. So yes, my name's Emily Tanner. I'm Head of Research at the Careers and Enterprise Company. And just in case you're not familiar with that, it's a national organisation funded by the Department for Education, which is charged with coordinating careers support across England's schools and colleges. And the organisation has three objectives. So what we do is, first of all, we build networks connecting education and employers and local regional development across the country. Secondly, we support careers leaders who are the staff in the leadership role around careers provision within schools and colleges to develop and deliver, oversee career programmes for young people. And then thirdly, we back the Gatsby benchmarks, and that's a framework of 8 areas of careers provision based on international evidence, which really encapsulates the gold standard of careers provision for young people from 11 to 18. So in this paper, what I'd really like to do today is describe the development of a tool that we've been developing to measure career readiness across key transition points in secondary education. And it's a great opportunity today because we're at quite an exciting point now, following a year of development and consultation and some technical development, which I'll tell you about. And we're planning to launch this tool to schools and colleges in September. So I'd like to sort of share a bit of the journey we've been on, some of the issues that we've been grappling with, and really hope to hear your perspectives, anything similar that you've been working on, or any thoughts or examples you've got of doing a similar sort of thing elsewhere. So I shall just move on. So I thought I'd start off by just really sharing with you the vision of what we set out to achieve. So first of all, the vision is that careers leaders in schools and colleges will take an evidence-based and outcomes-focused approach to planning their careers programmes, with the idea that all activity is really focused on maximising impact for young people and tailored to their individual needs. And just to sort of share with you the context for careers leaders in schools and colleges, they typically have real pressure on their time. They've got big responsibility for delivering careers provision across 11 to 18 if they're in an all-through secondary school, and within colleges if that's where they are. And often this is alongside other roles, particularly in schools. So careers leaders might also be teachers, they might also have other responsibilities. So our role as national coordinators in being able to help them to use data, and particularly to be able to distill the information they need through visualizations, can really help careers leaders think beyond delivery of activities. Am I doing everything in the Gatsby benchmarks, to really about the impact that the activities are having. And the second goal is that producing and sharing data on career readiness helps to balance the emphasis that we have on academic attainment with a focus on those all-important skills and knowledge that young people need for successful transitions into employment and for their working lives. And then a third goal for us is to create national data that will help build evidence on careers. And this is really, really needed. So both in terms of identifying what is effective practice and being able to distill that and share it, but also being able to understand evidence on impact. And so where this led us is to what we call the Future Skills Questionnaire. And this is a student self-completion tool that tracks progress in aspects of career readiness against progressive learning outcomes. And in putting it together, what we were led by was the aim to make sure it was short, really accessible to students from all backgrounds, including those with SEND, and to be based on questions that were consistently interpreted, so where young people are understanding it in the same way. And completing it obviously needs to be a really positive experience for young people, and an experience that inspires them to think about the future in a really age-appropriate way. And very importantly for us in our role is that it was tailored to the needs of careers leaders, who are the primary users of the data that it produces. So the whole process, as you'll see, was very much framed around what careers leaders consider to be important, although I'm going to ask for your opinions and thoughts on what we asked them to think about shortly, so in a minute or two. And I suppose it's also really important to be clear about what the tool isn't. So in itself, it's not a learning outcomes framework. There are others that it draws on to try and capture, but it's a measurement tool really that captures aspects of learning frameworks in a very kind of hopefully quick and easy way that provides some insight that's really helpful. And also it's not a psychometric scale, so we set out to aim for each item and question to have value in its own right, rather than prioritising the scale as a whole, as in psychometric instruments. So this is the process we went through to create the tool. We started out with an existing set of questions that have been used with students taking part in careers activities for a couple of years. And through that process, we'd gained extensive feedback from, particularly from providers of activities who are working really closely with these young people on what was working well and what was working less well. So that was really our starting point. And then from there, we began talking to careers leaders about their intended outcomes from careers programs. So the Gatsby benchmarks framework sets out the gold standard of what good provision looks like. So it has elements such as learning from labour market information, having experiences of the workplace, careers embedded within the curriculum, personal guidance, interviews, and so on. But it doesn't in itself say what the outcomes of those, what the intended outcomes are. So really getting a sense from careers leaders about what they're trying to achieve with young people, what they think is important, was our starting point. And I'm going to talk through the pilot and cognitive testing process in a bit. But just at this point, I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on the question that we posed to careers leaders. So we asked them, what are the knowledge and skills throughout 11 to 18 that you're trying to achieve for young people, that you're trying to improve for young people through the career guidance programs that you're delivering? So what is it that we should be measuring in order to get a sense of whether career programs have been successful? So I wonder if just for a minute in the chat, you could just jot down a couple of thoughts. Doesn't have to be comprehensive, but just share some thoughts about if you're in that situation, or if you can imagine yourself there, what would you say are the kind of career skills and knowledge that you would hope to be developing for young people? And I'm going to come back to it a bit later on, so I won't pause too long here, but jot them down and And I'll be really interested to see what you come up with and the extent to which it sort of resonates with what we heard from careers leaders. So thank you. We've got independent thinking, teamwork, technical skills. Thank you, Mark. I think that's from you. Employability, soft skills, understanding, choice, and hear about resilience, being self-motivated, those kind of personal development skills, profiling, problem solving. That's great. So keep jotting those down as they occur to you, and I'll come back to that. So I've put a little button here to show where we are in the process, and so this is to some extent a work in progress, but we feel like we're at a point where it's very much helpful to share with a broader audience and get some thoughts. So having refined the questionnaire halfway down, we then started working on integrating it within a digital tool called Compass Plus. This is a career management tool that we've developed free of charge for careers leaders to use in schools to record careers activities, track student data on participation and their industry interests and their destinations. So we're at a point now where the testing of that is nearly complete. And then when we reach September and launch it, at the moment we've got 1,800 secondary schools that are using Compass Plus who will have access to this tool. And that's been the number who've onboarded over the first 2 years, and we expect that to continue. So I mentioned that we weren't aiming for a psychometric scale with this tool, but we do really want the data to be as reliable and robust as possible so that it provides a trustworthy source for us to use as a basis, or for us to use, but for careers leaders to use as a basis for planning and evaluating their careers programs and targeting support. So we really sort of grappled with a number of question design issues and engaged external question design experts to support us in this. And I'm just going to run through some of the key points here. So the first one is around how we sort of frame questions in order to get young people to really think carefully about what they're saying, and not just to go to responses which they think other people want to hear or that they think are the sort of the right thing to say. So the feedback we had on the previous questionnaire, which was a series of statements and agreement scales, was this, the sense from careers leaders was that they didn't feel young people were very well engaged with this and tended to kind of tick down the middle or whatever. So we framed the questions as direct questions with a range of responses, including no, not yet, to really demonstrate that progressive nature of learning. Secondly, we needed the response options to capture that full range of possibilities so that young people can give their honest answer. And we wanted to tailor the questions to age and stage so that they're appropriate and a positive experience to respond to, but also to achieve variation across responses, so to help with targeting and identifying patterns. And so this influenced the response options that we came up with. In terms of how many of those are the right number, there's no real consensus in the research literature on that, but we settled on 4 response options for one set of questions and 5 for another, which I'll explain. And then we grappled with, do you allow, don't know responses. We decided in the end that for one scale in particular, that we would try and capture if they didn't understand the concept. We wanted to know the difference between just not being quite sure yet about themselves, or actually just not really understanding what the question was getting at. Then, of course, maximising engagement is absolutely critical. So this was a real focus of the testing and piloting process. Obviously, we use question design techniques such as keeping questions short, avoiding double-barreled questions, simple language, and avoiding ambiguity, and so on. But we also sort of got quite a lot of feedback from young people about how deeply they were able to think about the questions. And then finally, on the scoring, we were thinking carefully about how to present the results. And really, we've settled on criterion reference scoring, with the idea being that what's most important for careers leaders in using this data is to get a sense of whether students are responding positively to these questions, which are framed in what we think is an age-appropriate way, not about scoring and knowing, you know, what your percentage score is on a scale. So it's really about trying to get a sense of what proportion of students are answering in the way we would hope they would be for the age they are, and also for individual questions, what proportion of students are answering positively, what proportion are answering negatively, so that extra support can be targeted and the gaps understood and addressed in career programmes. And that's reflected in the visualizations that we've created for the tool.
Emily,
so, yes.
Oh, yes, we've got a question which I think is relevant at this point.
Yeah.
Will FSQ be available to schools who don't use Compass Plus?
Yeah, and I'm really, thank you, Sue, for raising that. It's a really good point. So it will be, in the sense that at the moment, the question sets as they currently are available online. And if any final changes occur as a result of this final stage of testing that we're just coming to the end of, we will update those. So the idea is that we'll make the questions for each of the transition points available to anyone who wants to use them. Within Compass Plus, there's this distinct additionality of the fact that it's then bringing the data back, presenting it back to careers leaders in a way that's then integrated with other information, sits in a student profile and so on. So it has those additional benefits. But if colleges who don't have Compass Plus or other schools want to use it, then they can program it in their own software, whatever they use. And it just means then that it's dependent on careers leaders or whoever's administering it to do that analysis and collate the data in. So this is the pilot and cognitive testing process we went through. On the left-hand side, it shows you the 3 ways that we tested the tool. And this all took place during October and November last year, which seems like such a long time ago now. But for context, in England, it was a time when most students were in school, but groups were being sent home periodically to self-isolate if they were in contact with positive COVID cases. Some parts of the country were in heavier restrictions. So it was a really challenging time, and a time when we were fully aware that the focus was on catch up and also a lot of adaptation to careers activities for a virtual context. But nevertheless, we had really good engagement from careers leaders, some quite deep engagement with careers leaders, lots of responses from students. And then this last phase of cognitive testing was where we were able to interview 40 students with the support of an external partner in some depth to really explore how the questions were interpreted, what information and experiences young people were drawing on in their responses, and that led to some changes to the questions as a result to try and make sure they were really accessible. And we learned a lot from the process, as just summarised on the right-hand side. I think what was really important for us to test was this tool going to be useful for careers leaders, and is it something that would be helpful to them in their practice? Would it help with the development and ongoing improvement of career programmes, and would it help them target support at young people? And those things came through as positive, so we felt that gave us a kind of important green light to continue. The student engagement was also positive, so we put in some open questions alongside the survey questions just to try and capture how engaged they felt while they were thinking about the questions, obviously to highlight any that weren't making sense and so on. And we obviously had some variation. Some young people weren't being sure why they were being asked about these things when they're 12 or 11. Others were saying they really welcomed the opportunity to think about it and it was really interesting and so on. So a mix, and the feedback from that has helped us to frame the guidance that we give to careers leaders in framing it. And as a result of that process, actually, we've included some open questions so that young people can sort of say a bit more about their thoughts and about the future. And definitely, as I said, threw up some particular questions that needed a bit more development. So these are the features of the tool post-pilot. And the important points to draw out here are that we have these versions which are slightly tailored. So broadly, the questionnaire looks quite similar, and I will show that to you in a minute. Slightly tailored to what is appropriate to each age and where they are in their career education. and tailored to points of transition in the English education system. So as young people are joining secondary school, as they're making their GCSE subject choices, and then as they're approaching the end of their GCSE years and needing to make choices and end of 16 to 18 study and making choices. There's a simplified version for young people with SEND, and overall there are 25 questions in total split across these two aspects of career knowledge and skills and essential skills. And I mentioned the response options and this positive negative split that we're focusing on, and these are the response options for the career knowledge and skills questions.
Hi Emily, just a couple of minutes before we move to questions, if that's all right.
Thank you, that's great. So the next two slides are very brief. So this, I'm not going to obviously take you through every question. I just wanted to really highlight the sort of broad topics that they cover in the career knowledge and skills. And there's a link in the slides where you can see all of the detail, but just you can see the sort of style of the questions here about sort of direct questions and the sorts of things that it's asking about. And then this one is the second domain, which is around essential skills. So these are what came up in the chat as sort of things like the problem solving, what some people call soft skills, employability skills, those sorts of things. And these are based very much on the skills builder framework, which is shown along the bottom. So there are 8 skill areas, and I've just highlighted here the one on teamwork. So you'll see that the questions here for each phase are much more distinct, because it maps onto the skills builder progressive framework. Just a few words on the administration of the tool of the Future Skills questionnaire within Compass Plus. The image on the left shows that careers leaders can select a year group and generate web links. And what's important about this then is that the results go back onto the pupil profile, as well as enabling the careers leader to sort those by groups and cohorts. On the right-hand side is just an example of one of the questions. The emojis have been quite popular. And our guidance is that this is completed during school time, in a class, framed and introduced so that young people understand what it's about, how their data will be used, all those really important things, and given the space to think carefully about it. And then finally, the all-important part is how the results will be used. So I mentioned the visualizations will really focus on this percent of questions which have a positive response, which you might call achieved, although we're using the language of positive response. The fact that it will be linked to this other detail within Compass Plus means that's where it becomes quite powerful. So going back to the question before about will it be available to others, one of the additional benefits of it in this tool is it enables a careers lead to say, okay, they've responded like this. What are their intended destinations at the moment? How are the responses differing by students, for students in different backgrounds and so on? And then the uses identified by careers leaders are listed out at the bottom. And just to add to that, because of the way we're administering this at the Careers and Enterprise Company, we will also be able to see the pseudonymized data and be able to explore patterns and insights at a national level in relation to careers provision. So over the coming years, we hope that that will lead to some really useful and new insights around effective careers provision for this age group. So that's where I'll stop. I hope that the timing's okay. And just to come back to all those things you jotted down, thanks very much. And I think my sense is that most of those areas that you mentioned around what you'd want to capture are probably the ones which maybe less so are some of those personal development skills that aren't necessarily so easy to capture in a kind of self-completion, self-assessment way. But anyway, I'll stop there and open up to questions.
You've got a few questions in the chat, actually, Emily.
Great. I'm just going to stop the screen share so that I can see those properly. Do you want to highlight any, Sarah?
Well, yeah, so there's just 2 there at the bottom. So Ed Dawson is asking, how often would this be done? I think that was the FSQ assessment.
Yes, so we are suggesting once every 2 years. So at those transition points that you'd get your snapshot, start of year 7, and 2 years later, around the time when students are choosing GCSEs and so on, we're not going to be really prescriptive about it. Once it's in there, if a careers leader wants to do it once every year, I think that's fine. What we're trying to get away from is the idea of over surveying young people. We certainly want to get away from the idea of doing surveys before and after, you know, every careers activity. So the idea is this kind of captures progress over time in relation to the whole careers programme, but isn't a kind of thing you do around every activity. And the question there about how long does it take, takes about 10 minutes, so it doesn't take a huge amount of time out, but the important thing is that it's introduced properly so that young people sort of understand everything they need to know before they do it. And that's why we think doing it in school time is helpful. Shall I pick up on that question, just sort of, in fact, working backwards from about LMI? So will there be insights for careers leaders to use LMI for students to achieve their full potential in career choice without moving? So I'm not sure I'm understanding that. Let me just read that again.
I'm happy to speak to that.
Yes, if you could, Justine, that would be great.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I'm just interested in the use of labour market intelligence, so and sort of social mobility, but without having to move away from home. So the idea that the insights that are gained from the questionnaires, and obviously for the career leaders for one-to-one guidance, you know, getting a child to choose a particular career choice is fantastic. But then how can that then be used within the locality or the region that they're in, so they can find that career near them?
Yes, so
Sorry,
that is a really
well formulated.
it's a really important point, and it's such a strong theme. I mean, I'm sure it's in this conference, it will have come up around alignment of young people's interests and local opportunities, and so important for that to be reflected in careers provision. So our careers leaders and those that support them, particularly in careers hubs, do get that sort of sense connection with local labour market development. And the idea is that through this tool, it's one way to kind of track over time whether students are understanding local context and aligning interests with it. In terms of how will they then know about those opportunities, I think that's really where this integrates with their personal guidance interview, with the people who are supporting them to make choices about their post-16 study and so on. So it's very much kind of providing an insight which then provides a starting point for others to have those conversations. I'm not sure if that's totally answered the question.
No, thank you. I can see how it connects to the other services, and how it kind of then builds on what the school and the career leaders are gathering, either as an individual or as a group of career leaders in the local area.
Yes, yes. So Mark's question about would the process start at the end of primary education? So we're very much in that space of transition from primary to secondary, and it's an area that we want to do a lot more on. So I think one of the things that careers leaders really liked about having this version that they could use as students as they start secondary school is to make sure that right at the start of their careers education experience in secondary, they've got a good handle on where young people are following their primary. So we're not proposing to push this tool down into primary, but very much sort of with a view to linking up with career-related learning during the primary phase, and then being able to sort of capture where young people are at as they start secondary.
Thanks, Emily. This is Mark Steele at Skills Development Scotland.
Great, thank you.
I really
Nice to
appreciate
meet you.
the presentation. We're working on a skills toolkit which looks very similar to what you're proposing here today. So I'll not take up the meeting by talking about that, but it might be good to speak to you at another time.
That would be super, yes. If we could connect afterwards, I'd be really interested to hear about that.
It's a national approach, so there'll probably be synergies between what we're doing and what you're proposing.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm really pleased you flagged that. The point from Sophie about will national aggregated results be published? So at the moment, we're not putting any sort of pressures or promises around this, because I think two things I'm really conscious of as we launch this. One is about data accuracy and representativeness. So if you've got a proportion of schools using it, or a proportion of students within a school, we don't want to immediately claim that's the national picture. So it's about framing and making sure that we've got a certain number of results and enough representation before we report those. But very much the intention is obviously to share that, so to be as useful for others as possible. The second point is just making sure we're not putting pressures that filter through the system, so that young people end up thinking they need to respond a certain way, or they're under some kind of pressure to be positive, because obviously the whole thing falls down if young people stop feeling that they can be really frank and honest. So those are the sorts of things that we'll be monitoring really carefully as we launch it.
Brilliant, thank you, Emily. I think we'll have to sort of leave it there for questions, but if there's anything unanswered in the chat box, I'm sure Emily will be able to answer those as we move on to the workshop component. And Emily's staying throughout the session, so at the end of the workshop, if there's any additional questions that come to people's minds, and we can always try and pick things up there if that's okay with everyone as well. So thanks for that really, really interesting overview of a tool that's ripe and ready to go pretty soon. So it'll be really fascinating to watch the results come in and see those kind of insights get pulled together really. So we're going to move now to a kind of workshop format, which is about embedding employer engagement to prepare students for career self-management during and beyond university. So Emily was obviously talking about 11 to 18-year-olds and the skills and knowledge for career support. And this section of the workshop moves us onwards nicely to 18 plus young adults and beyond that we're working with at university, and kind of looking at how we can support young people with skills in that arena really. And myself and Sarah were talking before the workshop today about the aim of today's workshop for us really. And I think we both felt it would be really great if today acted as a sort of starter or a catalyst to building a kind of group of individuals and organisations who are interested in talking about and sharing ideas about good practice in schools, in colleges, in higher education, so across educational practice really in young people's career self-management. Because reflecting on our myself and Sarah's varied career paths and career trajectories in private sector and in education, and also reflecting on experience of the students that are coming into university and that we work with throughout university, and the employers we talk to, we're hearing more and more about this competency of career self-management and this ability to, and perhaps more importantly, the confidence to manage your own career as being something really crucial for young people's future success. And when you look to research, you see in reports like the Institute for Student Employers 2021, so really recent research that's put together in the UK, that career self-management was one of the top 3 skills that employers feel that graduates lack in the UK. So there's obviously a real need from an employer perspective, but also I think from young people's perspective to feel that they're better equipped with this skill. So in terms of introductions, brief introductions, my name's Dr. Emma Parry. I'm one of the career consultants that works at Sheffield University Management School. I'm also a chartered occupational psychologist. And please, like I said before, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn or drop us an email to carry on the conversation after today. That would be brilliant. I'm joined by my colleague who is also the employability lead within Sheffield University Management School, Dr. Sarah Brooks, and a lecturer in organisational behaviour, and she's going to talk us through further on in terms of the overview of the programme that we use and that she's implemented at the university, and how we bring employers and education together in our work really. So if we move on to the vision, I briefly kind of alluded to this at the beginning, this is our vision really, and we said, want to see today as a kind of start of gaining a bit more momentum, if you like, by talking to others such as yourselves and broadening our horizons and our knowledge and awareness of what other people are doing and what they might think could transfer well into a higher education environment for us, for example, but also turn it, not just talk, also into action and doing, really. So the ways that teachers or lecturers or careers professionals and employers can help young people proactively to develop that really essential competency of career self-management. So the agenda for today, in practical terms, we've just split the workshop into 3 sections. So like I've said, Dr. Sarah Brooks will do a very brief introduction of what we've been working on at Sheffield around career self-management, and then we'll have some time in smaller breakout discussions to share what everyone's working on in this arena at the moment, and finishing with coming back together in the main room for a group plenary discussion, and hopefully sow those ideas into future projects or future areas to explore. So I'll hand over to Sarah now, who will kind of guide us through the ways we've started bringing together the worlds of education and work through what we call the Futures First programme. Thanks, Sarah.
I'm just having a little nightmare with the technology. Bear with me a second. I can't seem to be able to. Okay. Hi, everybody. Hi, it's really nice to meet you all. I can't see you, but you can see me, I know. So I can't see the chat, but please, please, please do ask questions or make comments as we're going through. Emma is going to jump in and tell me if there's anything that I need to know about. So first of all then, I want to give you an overview of employability at Sheffield University Management School. It's really important to us. I'm going to show you how we've embedded it. So we have an employability strategy of our own that's slightly separate to the overall university employability strategy. And both of those strategies are based on Higher Education Academy employability guidance. So it's grounded in everything that we know works and is important for students and employers. We also have a large infrastructure at the university, and we draw on everything that's available to us to support our students. So we've got the library, which is very supportive. They run lots of skills sessions. We've got a central careers service, which runs lots and lots of events, guidance, skills development for everybody in the university. We've got a dedicated academic study skills department, which is based at 301 Glossop Road. That's why we call it 301 Academic Study Skills. And we also have a dedicated careers service of our own up in the management school called the Employability Hub. And that's where Emma is based as a careers advisor. So if that's of interest and you want to know more about what we do in the Employability Hub, Emma is going to share some of that later on, particularly around how we bring employers and educators closer to the students. In particular, I'm going to focus on number 4 aspect of our employability strategy, which is about enhancing quality of career decision making, because that's what the career development plan is designed to do. Overall, though, what we want to do is enhance the students' skills, attributes and abilities. We want to increase their confidence and self-esteem, and we want to secure their desired career outcomes. And I think this is really important. It's helping the student come up with their own decisions about what they want to do with their future. This is not a guidance or advice situation where we shape them to go in a particular direction. It's based on a coaching approach and a reflective writing approach, which is really about helping them work out what's important to them as individuals. It's a full year compulsory module for the first year undergrads, and the module is about professional self-management. So ultimately it is about employability, but it's very much about giving them the tools and the skills and the confidence to allow them to manage their career through the time that they're at university and beyond. So the career development plan that I'm going to talk to you about in a second underpins everything that we do on the module. And what we have is lectures and tutorials. We have a very lively discussion board on Blackboard, which we've found to be really useful, particularly while we've been doing online learning, and students are able to ask questions to us as tutors, but also they're able to observe the answers and interact with each other, which we found has been really valuable. And then the skills workshops, which are available, like I mentioned, through the library, the careers service. They're not compulsory as part of the module, but we really do signpost and encourage students to take advantage of everything that we have to offer. There's a full year assessment, so there's no assessment in semester 1. At the end of semester 2, what they do is they fill in the career development plan and they record a 5-minute video telling us what they think the best career options for them are based on the work, the thinking and the reflection that they've been doing over the previous 9 months. The first 4 lectures that we do are in the first 4 weeks of semester 1, and it introduces the career development plan to them, and then it introduces them and they have an opportunity to engage with students who've just returned from their placement year. They have an opportunity to engage with recent graduates who are now working in a role, and they have an opportunity to engage with graduate recruiters. So we do all of that in the first 4 weeks because we really want to send a message that we are really committed to helping them use their university time to make sure it contributes to the career that they want. Now, we also recognise that semester 1 is not really about career planning, is it? It's about moving away from home, it's about living on your own, it's about finding friends. So we kind of leave them to it after that for a bit. There's conversations on discussion boards, so we do structured conversations every week. So they're going on in the background, and then we bring everybody back together at the end of semester 1 for a tutorial, which allows them to engage with that career development plan, and it kind of brings them back before they leave for the Christmas break. When they come back in February, I think I've noticed, you know, with first years, they come back actually as very different people. They seem to be more mature, they're more comfortable with their independent identity. And so semester 2 is when we do a lot of the work with them. So we have a lecture to get them back focused on careers. They have 5 tutorials, 1 every 2 weeks, which allows them to engage with the different aspects of the career development plan. And then they have a final lecture towards the end of semester 2, which is very much focused on the assessment. So in a nutshell, that's how we implement the career development plan. So let me show you it. So essentially it's 4 areas: knowing yourself, knowing the job market, knowing what to expect, and knowing what you prefer. And it's very much based on the principle that when we go to work, we give everything that we have to offer. And a lot of times, sadly, organisations make us feel as if we're giving more than we're receiving. And so this is very much about helping students make important career decisions that allow them to give as much as they get back in return. And we believe that's about understanding what do we like doing, what we're good at, what we're interested in, and really tapping into our dreams and desires. So I think, you know, our dreams get ironed out as we get older. And I'm really interested in helping people tap back into those and understanding what beliefs and values are and how that shapes the decisions that we make and the kind of life we want to lead. Knowing the job market is about what skills do you need for that job or that organisation or that industry, what experience do you need, what's the recruitment process, what does a good CV look like for that particular job you're applying for, and then how can placements and internships help you with those things. And it's that's the type of thing that we have available through the careers service, or it's available on the internet. So we're encouraging students to go and find out the answers to those questions rather than just applying for jobs, which I think is what they do, apply for jobs and hope for the best. So it's really very much about a focused approach. And then we've got these other 2 things, which are knowing what to expect and knowing what to prefer. And I think this is where the real reflection comes in a way, is what will it be like? What can you expect working day to day in that particular organisation? So how will the beliefs and values of the organisation shape the type of work that you're doing? How will it shape what they ask you to spend your time doing, the clients that you work with, the types of assignments that you're going to be working on? Earnings and benefits package, one of my favourite things to talk about is, so students have an idea, don't they? They want a really big salary and a company car. And actually, one of the things I really like talking to them is about what will that mean then? So if you want to earn £25,000, what does that mean? What kind of lifestyle can you have? What do you think the organisation will expect in return for the salary that they're paying you? And also benefits package. So this is one of the things that many students haven't considered at that stage, is it's not just always about salary, it can be about other things. And we might have standard benefits like holidays and maybe pension. But a lot of the students, particularly the females, I would say, are thinking also about, well, when I have a family, I would quite like to be able to have some time off, and I don't want to be penalised for having that time off. And then maybe it would be helpful to have some child support after that. And so they're already starting to think about organisations that can provide them with that, even though that may be years in the future. So I've been quite impressed by that. And then knowing what you prefer, what hours do you want to work? Where do you want to work? Do you want to work in a city? Do you want to work internationally? You know, they all have implications. And then opinions of others. Some people are very comfortable with advice being given to them by other people, and they look for career direction and support from their family or from trusted other people. But that's not right for some students, and some students just aren't able to get their own opinion across and make sure that they get their own interests looked for. So one of the things we talk about is, how do we recognise what those opinions of others look like, and actually, are we comfortable with it? And if not, what does that mean for our career decisions? We talked about enhancing the quality of career decision making, and so this is how, you know, we believe it does it really. It promotes self-management of career development, which is highly prized by employers, as Emma mentioned. Employers want people who can understand what a good opportunity looks like in a workplace, that they're able to go and seek what they want with passion, rather than the organisation having to work hard to motivate them and inspire them to do things. The work that we're doing on our programme supports life-wide as well as lifelong learning. So we're not just focused on making sure that students get that first job. We're focused on making sure that they have the tools and support they need to make excellent career decisions for the rest of their life. And the tool that we've created is based on work by Bourdieu, and he was really looking about how we're influenced by the people that are around us, and how it's really important that we kind of get a sense of who we are, and so we're able to find our own way in the world. So that's some of the conversations there around organisational setting. What would suit you best? What are your strengths? What do you want to do? And then actually, what are your personal desires and expectations? So Emma, can I over back to you now for the breakout groups?
Yeah, so now's the time to have a think and have a share, hopefully, of some ways that you have all been working to bring employers and educators closer together in your contexts that we can sort of learn from. So we're gonna, in a minute, Mark's going to put everyone in randomly small groups of approximately 5 people. And we'd like you to just focus on this one question, really, which is hopefully quite straightforward to guide those discussions, which is, how have you brought employers and educators closer together in your work of careers? And if somebody when you meet in your group, if you can do the usual student breakout groups and nominate somebody to kind of take a few notes and be happy to share back when we meet back in the main room, that would be great. So looking at the time, I think we've got, have we got 15 minutes, Sarah, do you think, for this? To come back together? Yeah. So if we have 15 minutes and then we'll send a message to let you know when the breakout groups are about to close, so you get a little bit of warning. But yeah, feel free to join the breakout rooms and remember to take notes. That'd be great. Had some really good breakout discussion room chats there. Sarah, how do we want to go with the feedback for this session? Shall we? How many groups did we have in the end? Was it 4?
3. Mark
3.
said. So yeah, so we'll do feedback from each group.
Yeah, and shall I start with my group, because I know it's Darren. Are you ready to go with our very, very brief summary? Is that right?
Yep, I'm muted. Yes, so one of the things in our group was that we have people from very different backgrounds. So we've got an academic background, we've got FE background, and we've got school placement backgrounds and SEN. So the kind of discussions we had and the kinds of things that came out was that there's a mixture of ways of kind of getting employer contacts. And so some in the FE college, for example, it was more about they had a dedicated team, but then individuals were also making links. For the SEN group, there was kind of harvesting links, a lot of networking. So it's about a strong sense. It was about building relationships over time to get employers interested and to build links with them. So, and in higher education, which is where I'm based, we're looking at much more around alumni and getting them involved, perhaps harvesting links with them, particularly maybe for work placements as well as having them back in. So there's lots of ways in which we can kind of harvest those links and we can get students interested in kind of different vocations, including students who've gone on into those careers, talking and feeding back about them. Any more? Do you want me to speak? If I can speak for longer,
No,
but I didn't
that
want to
sounds
say
good.
too much.
No, that's perfect summary. Should we move on, Sarah, in your group?
Yeah, so I think the 2 important points here were about formalisation of these employer education relationships. So they're not just individual relationships that kind of drop off when people leave, they're actually formalised. And also co-creation, actually. So it's not necessarily about having a set agenda and this is what people follow. It's about, with each cohort, being able to say what works for you. What do you want as an employer? What do you want as a student? What do you want as a teacher? And let's co-create something that works for everybody. Emily?
Yeah, so briefly for my group, again, lots of different perspectives, which is so interesting to hear. I'd say one common theme is about the place-based community approach. So both through the work that we're doing at Careers and Enterprise to link employers and education in local areas and really get that sense of local labour market intelligence, but also the work that Cabinet Office is doing in reaching out to communities, both from a pipeline point of view, but also raising awareness of opportunities. And then I was also really interested to hear about the work Edge is doing in their externships for teachers, where it's a way of bringing employers and education together by sending teachers out into workplaces to develop projects and so on. And then just a point about independent schools, which we don't often focus on in this kind of conference, but realising that there's a whole variety and I think some assumptions misplaced about opportunities for those young people and how often opportunities for accessing employer engagement are more limited in that environment.
Emma, I'm going to share the slides now. Is that all right?
I think we're just going to go back to a couple of slides where we just talk you through, like, thinking about, after that question, how everyone here in the room, in all their different kind of contexts, brings employers closer to the education environment. And just very briefly, a whiz through how we try and do it in university. And I certainly, today's discussions have given me, food for thought about how, elements we could add into this as well. But I've mentioned that in our group this morning, we use our alumni a lot to really, great effect. And I think that's a really you know, many of our alumni, they work for different organisations, but they often become employers themselves. They may, you know, start up their own business, or they may, you know, be the ones recruiting in the future. So we try and keep those close connections with alumni in order to have that kind of relationship building with current students, with people who've been in their shoes and who can see things from their perspective, you know, and have that positive will to share their experiences, really. So we have lots of different ways that we bring employers into the Futures First module that Sarah mentioned today, and also through our employability hub that sits within the careers centre within Sheffield Management School as well. So we will have employers coming in to do kind of career insights into different areas of work. We'll have them coming in to run sort of mock assessment centres or mock interviews, practice interviews with students to get really close to their recruitment practices and top tips and getting them feedback in terms of moving into work. We also have various presentations on different sectors or different career paths. Obviously, something that's more and more students are interested in at university level is doing a degree with employment experience. So this is where we have a year-long work experience that can be in the UK, or it can be overseas for additional experience as well. So that is another way we bring employers closer through those work placements, and hopefully employers having positive experiences on that, and then wanting to work with us in future to either take on more work experience students, or you know, work within in terms of feeding into our curriculum with ideas for assessments or ideas for sessions, or building on sessions that we already run from an academic perspective as well. So we have large careers fairs that we run centrally at the university at the start of every term. Obviously in the last year they've moved online, and I think that these will probably stay in some kind of hybrid blend for the future, because employers that we're working with have really valued that ease of access and, you know, less travel, less cost of that. So we do have those kind of traditional university careers fairs, but often we're having a much more kind of personal relationship with the employers in terms of supporting our students on those kind of practical elements of top tips for applying, you know, how to get into their organisation and the kind of competencies they're looking for, really. So I mean, overall, what our aim is really to raise aspirations as well for those students coming to us who may be from widening participation backgrounds and may not have had exposure to a range of careers that might now be opened up to them at university. You know, we often find that students who are the first to go to university in their families may not have access to the kind of breadth of careers options out there. So we work with employers who are, you know, often targeting students from a diverse background to make sure we're opening up those kind of careers for them, really. So that's what we do in a nutshell. Obviously, we offer the standard kind of careers support, careers advice with myself and another career consultant that works in the management school. So 30-minute appointments online or in person to, you know, go through CVs or discuss career plans or anything they really kind of need at whatever stage they're going through. So they do have that very bespoke support, as well as all the online, as well as the in-module support through a module like Sarah's, for example. So we're trying more and more to bring employability to that level where it's unavoidable, really, at university, to make it embedded, like lots of us have been talking about, you know, building it in the curriculum wherever possible, so that students are kind of regularly exposed to skills and knowledge around careers and employability. So I'm just aware of time coming on. We've got a couple of questions just to reflect on as a group, really, and we just open this to the floor. Just these 3 questions, but we don't have to stick, you know, rigidly to this if people want to explore further what's coming out of those groups. But what we are interested in is things like, you know, the ideas of critical thinking, or thinking more, or critically about careers and employability and reflection, how do we think that that's important in that kind of career self-management arena? And also, what do we think about career self-management, across the life course? So we've got people in here, with vast experience from primary through to higher education. How do we think that we need to be sort of, supporting that skills development throughout those different stages, really? So I'll just open it to the floor to anyone who either wants to add to those conversations or pose another question or thought is fine as well. Feel free to unmute yourself, or if you're more comfortable writing in the chat box, that's fine as well.
I attended a, I think it was a project-based learning work seminar, or whatever, sorry, the other day. Do you do much? I wasn't sure. Do you do much of that sort of thing within your department, where it's perhaps not actual employer, live employer engagement, but they set a project and then you work do? Because it looked, it seemed really useful. A good way of certainly developing a lot of key employability skills, like your problem solving and your creative thinking and that sort of thing.
Yeah, case studies are used regularly through the management school as a kind of learning tool in themselves, like that. So an employer, will kind of present that and talk through it, and then over time that will become a handout that the lecturer has access to, that sort of shows a problem that a company's had, and how would the students then work through it. Often then becomes like a group work exercise for the students to work through in practice. And I know in terms of in real time at the moment, during the summer, we've been running the summer challenge project for students. So I think 4 companies have come to us with issues that they're facing at the moment around topics like marketing or engagement with customers and clients, and have set this as a problem for students to work in teams and come up with a kind of Dragon's Den pitch, and then they'll be pitching their ideas to the companies of possible solutions. So it's a win-win, because the company gets some free, albeit starter ideas from undergraduates sort of working through ideas, but the students get to practice presentation skills, team working. That brings in virtual team working at the moment in the environment that we're in as well, and all those kind of academic skills. So that, we're trying to build in those kind of one-off use of organizations, as well as a kind of throughout a year or throughout a module. Sarah, do you want to add any others?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really frustrating, Ed, we do things like that, right? And I think there could be more, but one of the things that's really frustrating is the students just sometimes lack motivation. And you put these things on and people don't come. And there's definitely something, isn't there, about early on, from a very young age, really helping people to find out what is going to propel them forward and excite them about wanting to engage with employers and the world of work. There's something missing. I can't work it out myself.
No, I've just gone through a week with the school, and it's that. Yeah, it's just like, wow.
Can I just say something on that? Because I was just thinking this actually earlier, and going through my own process and thinking about how we can improve employability. But my students, I'm in the higher education sector, my students, what a question to ask somebody. What do you want to be? How actually often does anyone get asked that question? It's a really big question, isn't it? And I think actually the whole process is really bewildering for young people. There's so much. I think often they do courses, they do things not really necessarily well guided, but for whatever reasons, when I ask some of my students why they've chosen this course, and some of them you kind of frankly, you'd want it to be better. You want better information behind those choices. So I think it's a really challenging thing for young people to try to navigate. And so when we're thinking about what we might be trying to give them, it's that ability to kind of navigate these really uncertain times where there's information about so much, and to try to come up with a kind of answer to that question, what do you want to be? I think it's really big.
Sorry, no, Eleanor, please go.
No, sorry, Ed. I just wanted to lean in there, I guess, because we've all been through the education system, and just reflecting on my own time, I feel to have these important discussions with your peers, with teachers, you kind of need the time and the space to do this. And just reflecting back, the whole school system is so kind of geared towards getting you to your next qualification, getting you to your next exam, and students are just so kind of on this constant cycle of work, study, revise, get my exam, let's move on to the next one. So it's just, we're trying really hard at Edge to think kind of how do we open up the school experience, the school life, and so students actually have the meaningful time to engage. Because also these kind of discussions shouldn't just be the one-off, every few months. They need to kind of be built in regularly. And we're trying to do a lot more work around assessment reform, I guess, because for us it just feels if we can get that right, and that then feeds into the wider curriculum, and students can have more time to do, the presentation making, the team working, the leadership skills, and be able to evidence that as part of a rounder kind of education experience. They can then kind of build these vital, essential employability skills. We feel so passionate about this, but it's such a difficult thing to kind of to make movement on, because it feels such a big thing to try and change. But yeah, I'll pause there. I think for me it's just it's so difficult to kind of make change there.
Can I just come in on that as well? The situation in Scotland, we did a recent OECD report on Curriculum for Excellence, which is our system here, and one of the things that came out of that was about teacher contact time. It's the highest, one of the highest in the world in Scotland. And what I was going to say about that, just in the same way about giving time for students and pupils to have time for reflection, teachers need that as well. We throw a lot of things at them, in terms of like employer engagement and what have you, but sometimes they don't have time to accommodate it and to review it, and then to subsequently build the relationship. So I was saying in the Breakout group, the vast majority of our activity in employer engagement is what I would call transactional. So it's just employers that come in, they do something and then they leave, and you might see them again next year at the same time. So having a kind of system that allows that kind of time for reflection and review, I think would be really good. That's something to aim for.
So I think we'll just have to have you coming in as the final thing, because we have to finish at 12 because of the technology. But really, if we can all connect outside of this through the app or through our, emailing me and Sarah, we can connect to carry on these kind of conversations or share ideas somehow in this technical arena that we can use these days. That would be fantastic.